Welcome to another episode of AI Ranch, where we navigate the wild west of AI technologies and how it affects the businesses all over the world. So my name is Ewald Zurtens, and I'm happy to invite you with this insightful episode where we will do an interview. It's my pleasure to introduce my guest today, Magnus Hambleton. So he is an investor in the field of AI and also practitioner, and it's not often that you meet in an investment field people who are so educated and advanced in these AI tools. And when I talk with Magnus, when I meet him in conferences, I can talk with him as actually as one of my AI scientist colleagues even. So he's well educated in this sphere and also in the investment and entrepreneurship. So my pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. What a lovely introduction. Very kind of you.
Yeah. So let's start by giving what is your background and where are you from? What is your educational background, business experience? Tell a few words.
Sure, of course. So yes, I'm originally from Sweden. So my mother is Swedish and my dad is from New Zealand, which we were just talking about before the interview started. That's why my name sounds a little bit English. I'm currently dialing in from Stockholm from my apartment. So originally I studied in Australia and I studied engineering and economics. So I got a technical background from the beginning, but very unrelated to AI. I did environmental engineering, focusing on fluid mechanics. And then after university, I joined a management consulting company called the Boston Consulting Group and did management consulting for a few years in Australia and in Switzerland. And it was mostly focusing on kind of data projects. So I did a little bit of programming in like Python and things to do simulations of telco networks. But I mean, mostly it's kind of slides in that kind of job. And then after that, I joined a startup called Natural Cycles here in Stockholm. So they do a birth control app focusing on letting women know which days they are fertile or not based on what their temperature is, their basal body temperature is during their sleep. And there is when I really got more exposure to kind of AI. And in my last 2 years in that job, I basically started as a side project. I was teaching myself Python and TensorFlow in order to make these algorithms better. I had a hypothesis that the difficult part of figuring out where ovulation is not figuring out where it is, but being very careful about how uncertain you should be about where it is. So basically the confidence interval based on the data that you have. And so I taught myself Python and TensorFlow to train some neural networks on the data that Natural Cycles has, and basically in order to try and replace the kind of birth control core algorithm of the app. And so I worked on that for 2 years, and that's actually now I think in production, which is cool. It was basically like 6 months of learning how to do it, 6 months of training the models, and then 6 months of evaluating whether the models were actually better or not than the existing algorithm. It's quite a lot of evaluation scripts, and then 6 months of implementation. And then since a year and a half back now, I've been working with byFounders, which is an investment VC firm. So investing in all kinds of different startups, but I've been focusing a lot on AI.
So you're saying that that company succeeded after you also left there, and what were some of the key lessons you learned from that experience of being the part of the company that builds these products?
So I mean, so many learnings. I think one of many different lessons is that I was doing machine learning and building neural networks to do kind of time series on time series data, fundamentally on time series data. And it's time series data with a few quirks, which is basically makes it very unique. And it was very difficult for me to find models and frameworks that would work, because I think most of the kind of progress that's happened in AI in the last decade almost has been focused on images, natural language, voice, like very those kind of areas, which makes sense. That's where we've seen huge progress. But that means that like the really boring stuff, like tabular data and with lots of different field types, that's kind of become a little bit left behind, even though I'd say most companies have data in that format.
Yes.
So, and the quirks of female cycle data is also makes things quite unique. So there's a cycle is obviously a cycle, so it will repeat with a period of like roughly 28, 29 days. But the period is you don't know how long it's going to be in advance, and it's different between women, and for a single woman, it's also different over time, and that makes it very it's a very important characteristic of the data that it's going to have this cyclical nature, but the unknownness of that is very rare. So there's very, very few analogy problems that you can kind of draw from. So.
But you collected the data set, right? And you succeeded in some reasonable accuracy, right?
Yes, exactly. So we use the data set that we had from natural cycles already, which is basically backwards looking. So you can have more accuracy if you look backwards, and then you basically train the machine learning model to predict it forward ahead of time. So a classical time series. So.
And the business wise, what were the kind of your conclusions so far, and what was it the successful direction? Would you invest in that kind of company yourself?
I mean, I think it was a success. So the ultimate kind of headline result, which I think is underwhelming from the outside, but it was a big achievement internally, is that the neural network gave roughly 1.5 extra safe days at the same level of effectiveness compared to the previous algorithm. So that's kind of that's an uplift of about 10% for women. That they get. And in terms of whether I invest or not, I think the difficult part of this is that this is an area of extremely high trust, right? Like what we use as your birth control requires extremely high trust. And I think that in those areas, it's also got a huge amount of regulatory requirements. In those areas, it's difficult to build that trust and meet the regulatory requirements within like a classical VC fund timeline. So I think whether or not I invest, I think would be dependent on whether or not I would believe it could happen basically to become a unicorn within 10 years. On a personal level, I'm very much invested. I bought my options, and I'm very bullish on the company's long-term prospects. But I'm from a personal perspective, I'm thinking, many decades into the future. While as a VC, I have to think a little bit more like 10 to 12 years into the future.
Yeah, this is very right what you're saying. So, and then you went into investment management, and this is interesting also because it seems that you have now this technical experience as well. So you don't even need often technical advisors for these companies you evaluate, right? Or you still and how did you get in the investment?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely still like to lean on people who really know the details of the different areas within ML. But it's nice to have the background in the sense that there's a lot of parts of it that I do know, so I can kind of trust my intuition a lot when I'm looking at companies. But yeah, I mean, I think depending on how niche the application is, obviously I still need some help. So like if there's a very like specific ML ops problem that maybe I didn't face training the type of model that I did, then maybe I'll still get some help from other people. But yeah, I think it was a very opportune moment for me to switch into VC from operator land in that sense, because the AI boom I think happened like 3 months after I joined byFounders, basically, and I happen to have a very useful skill set for that. So.
But yeah, you could have started or joined another company, but you chose to go into investment. Is there something behind it, or would you advise other people who have worked in companies to do the same?
I think it depends a lot. I think for me it was an interesting. I was actually going to join another startup as like a product person. The first employee as a product person, and then ended up like going through the process with byFounders and just falling in love with the team and the mission, and kind of deciding to test these waters out for a while. I think I think personally it's very interesting to get exposure to many different companies from the outside. So as a consultant back in the days, you got exposure to lots of different corporates, and you saw lots of problems, and you made solutions to the problems or solutions. So it was mostly slide decks. And then when you're within a company, you obviously get to be very deep into a problem and see how that problem and the solution kind of evolve over many years' time. I think in this position, you get the benefit of being able to see relatively deeply into what the problems happen, and you get to follow them for a long time. But you do it for many different companies, which is really like interesting. So you get to see patterns across 40, 50 different companies and see what the effects are of decisions a year or two later.
I met a couple of people who have worked for years in investment management, and then they go and build successful companies. So it's very, very valuable information, most likely. So let's go into the investment philosophy. So how important is actually nowadays the AI component of business, or is the other components which are typically related to VCs, like the revenue growth potential, IP, or even data, is those more important than actual AI component?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think as always with a VC, as in the VC land, you're looking for a small or preferably large chance of a large outcome, like a very large outcome. So you're always trying to find what are the companies that have the potential to grow very quickly into something very big. And I think there's lots of different ways to do that, and there's lots of different frameworks to use to analyze that. There's a few necessary things. You obviously need to be tackling a market that will be very large at some point, maybe not now, but at least in the future. And you need to have an incredible team behind you to be able to build it. And you need to be using some kind of technology that will enable you to kind of differentiate so that you remain large long term and don't get outcompeted by the other entrants that come in. And I think from that perspective, the AI boom that's happening right now is something that's obviously increasing the market of a lot of different things very fast. And I think we're all seeing that the market for like ML ops has probably increased by a few tens of factors over the last few years, and I think it's going to continue. There's a bunch of other things around like data, and the whole LLM boom also is probably increasing the market size of a lot of different things. I also think that there's a lot of industries and markets and products that previously would have taken longer to build in, but now because of AI are going to basically shorten the timeline. So my hypothesis at the moment, and we'll see if this is right, is that there's a bunch of industries and potential products that previously would not have fit inside of the kind of 10 to 12 year window. But now, because of the accelerating progress basically everywhere, I think that they will start fitting inside that window. And I think we have to obviously be careful to make sure that we hit it. But that's my hypothesis. So a lot of things that would have been out of scope for traditional software VCs, I think are now in scope, including like more hardware type stuff, deep tech type stuff, biotech type stuff. So
this is really intriguing. So how do you see the hardware being accelerated to the market using AI technologies? You're saying that, like as you said, previously most of the hardware products would probably not fit in those 10-year VC cycle, but then now with AI, it would be possible. Do you see some examples of how this could happen?
yeah, so I think like pure hardware obviously maybe isn't as impacted as maybe like a hardware and software combination. But I still think that there will be effects on pure hardware, right? There's a bunch of robotic startups that are coming up that are using the AI. I think in general, like there's a lot of production that's being impacted by AI, like designing chips better or designing components better or doing like optimizing for like forces and all this kind of stuff, which is using AI tooling. And I think ultimately, like once you have AI that's also being able to do production of custom components very fast, then that will also increase kind of speed. So I'm not sure if that will be within the 10-year kind of timeline that I'm thinking, but maybe. But I think there's a good chance
Or
that even
maybe
like pure
also
hardware stuff.
with the AI tools you have better marketing intelligence, you have better abilities to do the sales, right? Maybe these products which usually take longer to take off could take faster off, something like that. But so and how do you access the potential, for these your companies that come to you, or most likely you find them, right? So what are some of the criteria you primarily look at?
Yes, for sure. So, I mean, maybe I can do like the kind of the philosophy of the fund is very much that we're kind of community driven, right? So we're based here in the Nordics. We have offices in Copenhagen and Stockholm, and we invest in what we call the new Nordics, so the Nordics plus the Baltics, or companies that have some kind of associational link to those countries. So founders that are from here but working somewhere else, or founders that are strongly connected to the kind of community. And so we have this thing we call the collective, which is a bunch of founders of most of the unicorns from the Nordics and Baltics that are very actively involved in helping us find companies and work with the companies we've invested in, that kind of stuff. So we find a lot of companies via that network. So we find people via introductions and knowing someone that's building something and that kind of stuff. But we also obviously do kind of proactive outreach to try and find people. But yeah, for the philosophy of the kind of investments, was that what you asking? What was the question?
Yeah, more about what are some of the criteria you look at when you find them.
Yes, and for AI companies specifically, or?
Yeah, for the company. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think, as I said before, like I think a small chance at a large outcome, which basically means that you have to tackle a massive market. You need to have an incredible team that can build things quickly. You need to be tackling an opportunity that kind of differentiates you. And I think that's the tricky part in AI at the moment. I think that's the thing that everyone's struggling with, right? These kind of GPT wrapper company type style thing. Like if, there's a lot of question marks on whether or not they can differentiate in the long term. And I think it's tricky, right? I think maybe like basically like a year and a half-ish ago when I mean honestly really since GPT-3, which is actually more like 3 years ago. But I think when GPT-3 was released, I think there's probably like 100,000 to 1 million companies that's went from not being possible to being possible, right? And I think we've barely scratched the surface of what those companies are, right? I think in the first 2 years since GPT-3 was released, we basically almost made nothing, right? And then ChatGPT came out, which basically just showed a lot more people what was possible. And then a lot more people have started these companies to see what's possible based on what was possible then. But I still think that we've barely scratched the surface in this. I think there's so many companies that are possible that people haven't started yet. And I think from a VC perspective,
agree.
yeah.
I agree.
And I think from a VC perspective, what becomes tricky is that I think the vast majority of those companies are not going to be $1 billion or $10 billion companies. I think they'll create immense value for society and for the users and life-changing amounts of money for the people that found them, but they won't become worth $1 to $10 billion, which is kind of the threshold that we need to think about when we're investing. So it's tricky because you're talking to founders who are building something that's incredible and that has incredible traction, and the users are super happy with it. But you still have to be careful about whether or not you should be investing because it maybe is not going to be a $1 billion company. And so I think then we have to look more when you go back to the criteria. I think the criteria that become more important then is how do you build an AI company that will have a sustained edge over time, that will continue to have a differentiating moat and continue to get better. And I think a lot of that comes down to data. Like what is the data set that you are collecting via your product that will enable you to make your product better over time in a way that is not going to be reflected in the general purpose models becoming better. So is there some type of reasoning or some type of data or some type of process that is so different from the general reasoning that you can find on the internet text data?
But you're what you're saying. This is really I think fundamental. The one thing that many founders do not realize is probably what you're saying, that it's not only the traction, not only the cash flow, not only the technology and so on, but this potential in 10 years of being the unicorn, right? That's one. And then the other thing is data, and the data. Maybe you're aware of that as well, but the GPT-4, right, and even GPT-4 Turbo, these large language models, they actually don't use all of the internet's data. The common crawl dataset is so huge, and also the other datasets are so huge. The text is data that is so abundant that you cannot actually train model that encompasses all of the text datasets that are out there. If you do that, it'll train like 5 years on all of the GPUs that we have. So it's basically, these are some cocktails, right, of mixing data together, and it means that for foreseeable future, these models will be based on some specific components of that data. And if you have some unique data that is very valuable for longer period of time, that might be a good edge, right? Or
for sure,
am I
exactly.
missing something?
No, 100%. If you already have the data, that's great, because then you can already build a product that's differentiated. But I think the other way to differentiate is to build a product that will gather data via people using it, and then that data can be used to kind of fine chain or make your own models that will basically end up being also better. So like basically the classic data flywheel type thing. I think that's a very important way to think about the future.
Have you encountered startups that have claimed substantial AI capabilities, but then when you examine them, you found out that there is not much there? And how do you find this? Yeah.
Yes, lots of times for sure. I think it's funny, right? I think that when there's a new platform shift, and a word becomes buzzworthy, then you have to, people just will use that in very weird ways, right? I think, and that's just natural. I think and I think in many ways it doesn't matter too much, right? I think that if you're starting an AI startup that's built on top of GPT-4 and that you can already build your current product and get traction, then the fact that you don't have an AI person on the team yet, but you will in the future if you want to fine tune, I think honestly that's fine. I don't think that that's like a huge negative. I think it's obviously a little bit misleading maybe to call yourself like a top tier AI startup, but I mean that's the truth of it. I think that the startups in many ways that are doing like really deep AI research. I mean, like you guys, Asia and the pitch patterns. I think obviously there I can understand that there's also some resentment around that because if you've actually built up the expertise to do this, and then someone else is just using some random API, they basically just have an API key. They call themselves an AI startup. That's obviously diluting the value of what an AI startup even means.
You say you have seen this that there are those companies that just use the third party extensions as so, but then can those companies become these unicorns in your opinion, like in 10 years, or initially they use the third party, then they build their own models, or is it actually at all important to have on-premises models?
I think it depends 100% on your use case. I think there's plenty of companies that can become unicorns that will use APIs to start off with, or even for many years going forward. I think that there's other ways to make this differentiation, right? I think in many ways, I mean, there's a classic thing of like software is eating the world, right? And I think right now AI is to many extents eating the world. And I think that you have to enable AI in basically anything that you're building because there's such a productivity uplift that even if it's just a matter of like letting your employees use ChatGPT, I mean, you have to be using AI in your business in some way. And maybe it's a feature that you ship to your customers, or maybe it's a way that you improve your own workflows. But I think the important part is that you need to think about then what is the way that you develop remote long term. So if it's a pure AI company, then maybe it's going to be a data flywheel effect. You gather data and you make things better. But the other ways that you can make moats outside of AI still are valid, right? If you're building something that has a network effect, then that's also a valid moat, even if you're just building something on top of OpenAI's APIs. Or if you have long-term lock-in for companies, so you can basically gradually build up like a contract book that's like a very, very valuable over time. Or
You're saying that there are potential also for API-based companies to grow to this unicorn status in the future, but then you cannot even start with some of the market segments if you don't have your own AI capabilities. Like if you would like to do any kind of business with larger corporations, most of them require on-premises data processing, at least as far as I have encountered, or you have different experience on and how to, with the startups, how this works, or you even don't go in that direction.
I think obviously if you need to be serving enterprise, then maybe that is harder, right? But there's plenty of unicorns that you can build that don't have to serve these massive old school enterprises that require on-prem. So I think that there's definitely ways to go about it there. I mean, I think that one of my most recent investments is a company called QA Tech that's doing quality QA testing using AI basically. So the kind of when you click through the different user flows you might have to find bugs once you've updated something and shipped it, or before you've shipped it ideally, then QA Tech is basically the one that will automatically test those things. So previously a human would click through them, and now an AI will do it. And they're starting off by using a bunch of APIs, right? They're using APIs because that's the best models that exist at the moment are ones that we have by APIs for general purpose reasoning. Obviously, in the end, they'll probably end up using fine-tuned models or maybe even in-house tuned models that will be for action-based data. But right now, it's fine to use the APIs because they want to be able to ship a product that's going to work, right? Maybe they start off like doing simple tests that are like low value, but everyone has to do them. And then over time, they can make more and more complex ones, and they'll have to make custom models, maybe for each type of test, or maybe for even each type of company. But on the way
Mhm.
there, they'll be developing a very unique and interesting data set, which will allow them to kind of make those models in the future. And I think
Mhm.
that's kind of the way that we think about it. It's also very early. I'm in general more in favor of companies that are doing something that's like almost not possible, or like maybe not even possible yet, but will be possible soon, and that are thinking ahead of time. So with like general purpose clicking around websites, the large language models can do it, but they're not amazing at it yet, right? And so
Mhm.
building this company is like, this is the first time in history, probably like maybe like 6 months ago, that you could have started building this company using these kind of general purpose models. And so
Mhm.
therefore you're going to be benefiting as things get easier and easier because the models get better and better. You're also going to get a naturally increasing value for your product on top of whatever data
Mhm.
that you collect and then you can fine tune things on. So
And what about the patents? Have you have any patents in your portfolio for the companies? And is it actually possible to patent any kind of AI related software methodology? And America, Europe, do you have experience in that front?
it's a good question. I don't actually think that we have any companies in our portfolio that have AI related patents yet. We definitely have companies that have patents in the kind of the physical world and in biotech and that kind of thing. But I don't think we have any that like are using pure
Mhm.
AI patents. I may be wrong about that. Maybe AI, which is a health tech AI company that does like AI for hospitals and for emergency call centers and things like that. They do like automatic triaging and things like this. They might have patents, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that.
Mm.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it's a good
Okay.
question. Yeah.
So you mentioned about these using larger models and collecting data. So have you seen good examples, and what do you think about like mining larger models for data and then training smaller models, and or 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 that's feasible, or how do you see or look at that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's an interesting area. I think that I mean, I'm actually not sure if OpenAI has updated their terms to allow the mining of their results, but maybe other models probably would have it. So like, I guess it's basically like distillation is kind of what you're talking about.
Mm.
Uh,
Almost the not the classical distillation of machine like training the models, but like extracting the data and combining the input of data and then getting the results and then using those results for as a basis for another data set, you know.
yeah, true. Yeah. So I guess it's distillation, but without using the kind of
Yeah.
layer back from the yeah. But yeah, I think it's definitely a valid thing to do. I mean, when you have like a model like GPT-4, which is like quite an expensive model to query, like is using a very large number of parameters for stuff that you most likely don't care about. Like if you have a enterprise SaaS product that's doing some specific task for companies using a GPT-4, then there's no value being added to you that the fact that GPT-4 is storing like probably like using maybe 50 billion parameters to store facts about Japan in it, right? I mean, that's completely irrelevant to you. So if you can then gather a bunch of data about from GPT-4 in the specific use case that you care about, and then distill a model that has maybe some high level reasoning abilities, but is much smaller and hasn't kept all the facts, then you can distill it and make it much more better at the specific thing that you care about. So I think there's lots of value in doing that. I think it's mostly I think about that as a cost optimization exercise because your reasoning doesn't tend to improve across the
But
board.
I think there are at least two directions that doing this makes sense. One is so you can easily identify most of the companies using directly GPT-4 API for real-time applications if it's extremely slow, because GPT-4 for real-time, that will be super slow, and then if you build your own model, it can be very, very fast. And the other thing is, as you said, if you have your own data set, then you can combine your own data set with the mine data, and it will be better than just having the GPT-4. So there are at least two directions where you could improve your product in that way.
Totally. Yeah, no, I agree completely. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, I haven't seen, I don't know of any portfolio companies that have specifically been mining the APIs in that way. And do you know, does OpenAI's API like terms of use allow that now? Or because I think it was a couple months ago there was some controversy around that wasn't.
I think it would be very hard for them to stop it and prove it, and even now if you can use GPT-4 for writing papers, scientific papers, thesis, so on, and no plagiarism system will detect it except if the OpenAI builds some kind of watermark inside there. But otherwise, it's very hard to prove. So that's that. But then let's go forward. So from your experience, how much it usually takes for new teams to build the initial most viable product based on these AI technologies in terms of money, in terms of time? What would be expected for B2B SaaS, some kind of solution? How much it would take? What do you think? Usually, approximately.
I mean, I think it varies. I mean, unfortunately, the answer is going to be that it varies. But I think that the timeline is definitely decreased, right? The amount of productivity that you can get out of an individual developer has increased, and it's increased over several decades, right? A developer today without AI tools is probably 100 times more productive than a developer in the 90s, and we still have much more developers. So I think that the AI is just a continuation of that trend. I'd say, I know of several portfolio companies that have specifically decided not to hire more people because they realize that they can actually use tools and be more productive just by the same with the same people they already have. And I think in general, the trend is that we see that it's easier to create products faster than it used to be. And I think that's true just for like the last year. And it's crazy how fast this has gone. I think we can see a market difference between the timelines that people who are not used to working with AI tools expect things to take compared to people who are used to working with AI tools. There's definitely a difference there. And so to get to an MVP, I think it is just faster than it ever has been. I think both when it comes to non-AI related SaaS, like you're talking about, or when it comes to making a very cool demo built on top of some APIs for a specific use case, both are super fast. I mean, I know one founder who's built basically the MVP in like a couple of weeks, and it's mind blowing. Like you look at it and it's like, this is a crazy
And
piece of
the
technology.
would like in that case, without going into specifics, did you saw that this was tool that could make money, and actually also did you see it only from that MVP that it had the potential to go to unicorn direction? What do you think from that
I
case?
think Yeah, I mean, I think yes, definitely to make money for sure. But to get to unicorn, I think the main thing is that like to get to unicorn status, it's not just about the product quality, it's also about time, right? And when you allow time into the like time to grow and time for people to hear about it and things like this. Sometimes that you're lucky and that happens extremely fast, like with ChatGPT, and then you can get to, I don't think they're raising at $90 billion at the moment at OpenAI. So then you're very, very high, but they've also been going since 2015. But if you allow time into the equation, which is needed for most products to kind of gain momentum, then you also have to factor in the fact that time allows more competitors to enter the arena and
Yes.
more advancements in AI to make your advancement not look as cool anymore. So I think so based on that, I would say no, probably not a unicorn based on that 2-week MVP, unless they could have everyone on Earth magically know about it, because then I think it would be.
No, but it seems like logically seems that if you can build something with which I totally agree that the AI tools like GitHub Copilot and so on, you can make things so much faster. But then you can make something very fast, right? And then it kind of means that it's not too difficult to replicate. So basically, I would say that wouldn't it be true that for something to lift off very successfully and keep going for foreseeable time, it should take more effort even. But it means that you have these tools that allows you to make it faster progress, but still you need more effort than some other people could put in, right?
I think you need more effort or like a fundamental insight about the direction that you're going to go. So if you start off with something that maybe is super easy to replicate, but your plan is to go in a certain direction because you realize something about the data you'll need to make it better, for example, then I think it's more compelling, right? Rather than if you made some demo that that everyone will be able to copy the next day, and then once they copy it, your business is dead. So I think it's more subtle than the amount of effort it takes to create the MVP, because I think there can still be valid businesses behind things that take 2 weeks for someone to make. But I think it depends very much on the founder. Yeah.
Yeah, they agreed, the team as well on things. So the and market, right? So but then so you said new Nordics, right? So what is the importance of regional aspects of these models and companies, and do you see potential of building AI products that are regionally focused, where the other players would from the big markets would not immediately come? Well, how do you see that going on?
Totally. I think both you and me have spoken about this before as well. So, I mean, I think that there is a large part of the world that GPT-4 is not very good at in the local language, right? I think we both speak languages that GPT-4 is like significantly reduced intelligence when it's speaking in Swedish, or I'm sure in Latvian too, right? It's I'd say that the equivalent is it's almost a full, or like at least half a generation behind when it switches from English to Swedish, I'd say. So it's like GPT 3.5 quality in Swedish, which means that I do think that there is room to make models that are specifically trained and good for a specific language. The question is obviously whether or not that will be enough to make kind of the unicorn, etc. Like if it's a big enough market to end up being that big. I'm not sure. It depends on the market probably. And I think the bigger the market is, the more likely GPT-4 is also already good at that language. Like I think German and Spanish is already pretty good for GPT-4, for example. But I think there's massive value in like being able to serve that market, because it's not really being served in the right way.
It's not only the language, right? It's the specifics of the even the job market, health structure in different countries. So probably there is potential in those aspects as well, right?
Totally, for sure. Yeah, 100%. And especially when it comes to technical language, like we're just talking with a health AI company in Norway, which is we wanted to use some models for like medical language in Norwegian, right? There's no model that's good at that. Like that's a very unique problem, right?
And so let's discuss a little bit. What are some of the AI technologies that you think are right now undervalued? Some that are overlooked, and which usually the large language models, the all sorts of that area that is very popular now. But is there something that you see that usually investors or the founders in this field overlook right now?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. I think that the one thing which I think is pretty hyped, but I think it's not hyped enough almost, is the whole agent type thing, like using large language models in an agent type structure to be able to do tasks for you. I think that's kind of the future of job automation, and I think we haven't cracked how to do that well. We haven't. They're not trained. Large language models are not trained to do that. We just use their reasoning capabilities to kind of hack together agents, and then they work like surprisingly well. But I think that once we can work out a pipeline for training models to be good in agent-like environments, then I think we're like very close to AGI almost. I think that's going to be a huge shift forward. I think another thing that I think this is also something we've spoken about before, but I think another thing that's generally undervalued by both VCs and founders is the fundamental differentiation you can get by creating a good design pattern for the way that you want to interact with these models. Like, I don't think we've cracked the way that we should be interacting with large language models. Like the chat box was just the simplest and most dumb possible way to interact with a large language model. And I don't think that's the way we're going to be interacting with them like forever, right? I think we'll always maybe talk to them and do certain things, but when it comes to like job automation and tasks that need to be doing, like typing things out is just not a very effective way always to be doing that. So especially if you're doing something like more abstract, like designing things or interacting with the real world in some way, you need to direct a robot to do something physical, for example. You don't want to have to type that out into a chat box. It's not the way that you do things in that context. Same with like the whole, yeah, I guess like the humane pin and that kind of thing is a little bit into that as well. Like, is it the voice? And if it's voice, how do you create an abstraction layer that people will understand what they're doing when they're speaking to something? Like, how do you navigate menus via your voice? That's something that's not really solved yet. So I think that's an area that I'm also very interested to see what founders end up doing.
Okay, so the Nvidia just become the $6 trillion company. You probably heard that. So it's running the like an Apple, right? So and they just running the GPUs. And a couple of years ago it was just for gamers, then for the crypto, right? And then now they believe that the whole world will be running on that. So and how big is the AI bubble in your opinion? You know, when we compare it to web, the mobile bubble, the crypto bubble, is it actually in the bubble, and when do you think it will burst, and what will be the consequences from your perspective?
Yeah, yeah. If I knew the answer to that, then we'll be having a conversation in a few years' time where we'll both be very rich people. But we'll see. I think that I think the whole Nvidia side of things is probably unsustainable, I'd say, because ultimately they earn basically CUDA, which is obviously super valuable, but ultimately it shouldn't be the kind of thing that's impossible to replicate. And I also think that the fundamental chip design side of things is also something that over time I would expect to become more competitive. So I'd say, if anything, I'd say that the parts of the value chain at the moment that kind of deserve this hype would more be the ones that are like the bottlenecks for production, which I think is ultimately like TSMC and the people that own the places producing these chips. But I'm also skeptical how long that will last. Like, yeah, I'm not sure how long the kind of GPU gluts will remain. It'll probably take a few years to scale up production to meet demand, but once that happens, I would expect it to be to like basically start going.
It kind of ties together with the AI advancement as well. If the demand for AI products still increases foreseeable time, then also this will not be the case when we just meet the demand of the market. The demand will still grow, and Nvidia have this unique edge over all the competitors of that they have been building for, let's say, 15 years. The software layer that the other competitors were ignoring, and now the other competitors cannot catch up with that, and it's extremely difficult. Because we tried, like maybe you have heard of that, Intel Habana. So they tried to do these GPUs, and my scientists tried to run some of the models on those, and like PyTorch and any other libraries, like they totally doesn't work with that, even though they tried very hard to make them compatible. And so, and you see that this huge difference between Nvidia, CUDA, and all other solutions. So you still, do you see something in that direction, that Nvidia has basically now the monopoly status over AI?
I think yes, in some regards, yes, but I'm still skeptical about how long that will last, right? Like we've seen a massive reduction in the size of models with the same capabilities just in the last few years, where we almost haven't changed any of the architecture, right? And I think that for all we know, we're around the corner, there'll be an architecture that's like 100 times more efficient in terms of parameter count. And then suddenly you can have models running locally on people's laptops. I mean, Apple's made very nice kind of GPU-like chips already that they've shipped to every laptop that they've had in the last few years. So I think that I don't think that you're wrong, and I think that it may well continue to be like that as you describe it for another decade. But I don't think it's impossible for that to just suddenly evaporate over the next few years. Like I think things are happening so fast right now that it's really hard to predict what the effects get.
Yeah, so we definitely know what NVIDIA excellent researchers are not doing. They are not researching models that are more efficient. They need
Yeah,
to build
exactly.
larger models as large they can, so that they can sell more GPUs. So, but that's good direction. It might happen that, you know, the size and the performance goes in direction of like a lower hardware requirements. So okay, let's go to the try to go into the summarizing things. And so what kind of advice would you give for new entrepreneurs who would like to, you know, start something in this direction of using AI tools or AI technologies and build? What would be the first steps, and what should not do, and what they should do initially? What do you think?
Yeah. I think, in general, for founders, I think that you should think about like, do you want to build something that's like compatible with a VC case? So do you want to build something that could be like a billion or $10 billion hit business? And if so, then you should really carefully think about the way that you differentiate. So about the data flywheels, about network effects, that kind of thing. I think in general, in that space, it's better to start building something that is not currently possible, but might be possible in like a year or two with current capabilities. That's kind of the advice that I've been giving founders who want to enter that space. I think if you don't want to build something like that, but you still want to make like a life-changing amount of money and build something that lots of people love, I think there's literally 100,000 companies that you could be building right now. So I think taking an idea, running with it, testing it, executing, and seeing whether you get people on board is just like it's never been easier to do that, and it's never been faster to do that. So you can run through 10 to 20 ideas in a few months and see whether or not what sticks, basically. So that's kind of extremely important. I think in terms of tooling, also just make sure to use the AI tooling that's out there. Like there's a lot of people that are skeptical about using AI for like coding and for various types of things. And I think the important thing is just that try it, see what it's like for real, because it's never going to be as bad as it is currently.
Yeah. So and then you touched this thing. So also at the end, maybe you can give some advice from your experience. What kind of AI tools you have found useful in your personal, use cases, or even for the investment analysis? Do you have some specific tools and something that you remember that are good?
Yeah, I mean, I like the classic one is ChatGPT. I think it's fantastic. I use it for everything. I use it to learn German when I speak with it. When I'm shopping, I just have a conversation with it. It's fantastic. I also like using Poe, which is Quora's app, which allows you access to lots of different models. It's a nice way to try out a bunch of different LLMs quickly. So they have Claude on there and like Aleph Alphas. I think one of Aleph Alpha's models and a few others, which you can then quickly test and see like where are the other labs at the moment. I think other in terms of like image generation, there's obviously like so many. I've been using DALL-E, obviously via ChatGPT. I've also been using Midjourney. I've been using a tool called Krea, which I really like, where you can upload logos. Krea with a K, so Krea.
Okay.
You can put up like patterns and things, and it can create like AI images generated based on patterns. I made a few using byFounders logo, for example, in different environments, which is really fun. Then using it for like note taking. So you've got pitch patterns and our portfolio company Supernormal, which does that for video calls. You don't have to take notes. Lots of like productivity tools and things like that help a lot. Yeah, is there anything else I can think of at the moment? Copilot, obviously, for coding. There's a bunch of others. Yeah.
Yeah, GitHub or Copilot, that's true. But and then have you tried something for investment, or it's still open?
Yes.
Opportunity.
I haven't. I think ultimately, at the moment, we've decided that when it comes to decisions of deciding whether or not to speak with a founder, and after we've spoken with the founder, I think it's important that we use state-of-the-art models. And at the moment, the state-of-the-art models for decision is the human brain. But that may change, right? But that means that we don't make decisions based on AI, but we do use AI for automating small processes. So I built a few Zapier integrations on top of GPT-4 that helps us, fill out the CRM type stuff, writing like relatively generic emails and that kind of stuff. So there's a bunch of things like that. I also use Superhuman for helping to like write templated emails, and then you can edit them and fix that kind of stuff. So a bunch of productivity tools that you can build.
Okay, so yeah, Magnus, it was a pleasure to talk to you as always. Thank you for sharing these great insights, and the world is changing so fast with AI and other things. And yeah, and to our listeners, thank you for joining AI Ranch, and as a gratitude, please consider subscribing and liking the video, and see you in the next episode. Thank you.